Supply chain risk and the management of supply chain risk. Welcome to the Risk Management of Everything channel. On this channel, you will see videos on risk management and the application of risk management to diverse areas and sectors. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the notification button so you can be notified when we upload new videos. Thank you. This video discusses supply chain risk and the management of supply chain risks. In this video, you will understand the meaning of a supply chain, why should a company understand its supply chain, stages of a supply chain, examples of supply chains, generic supply chain and an e-commerce firm supply chain management, supply chain roles, supply chain risks, external and internal supply chain risks, supply chain risk management, the importance of supply chain management, nomenclatures of supply chain roles, supply chain risks, features of successful supply chain risk management, steps of supply chain risk management process, and supply chain risk management strategies. Now, let us start. What is a supply chain? A supply chain is a network between a company and its suppliers to produce and distribute a specific product to the final buyer. A supply chain is the activities required by a business to deliver goods or services to its consumers. This network includes different activities, people, entities, information, and resources. The supply chain also represents the steps it takes to get the product or service from its original state to the customer. A supply chain is an entire system of producing and delivering a product or service, from the stage of sourcing the raw materials to the final delivery of the product or service to end users. The supply chain lays out all aspects of the production process, including the activities involved, information communicated, natural resources processed into valuable materials, human resources, and other components that go into the finished product or service. A supply chain focuses on the core activities within our organization required to convert raw materials into finished products or services. Companies develop supply chains so they can reduce their costs and remain competitive in the business landscape. Why should a company understand its supply chain? A supply chain risk management plan is a strategy to speed response to as many circumstances as can be predetermined to minimize disruptions to the supply chain if they were to occur. A supply chain involves a series of steps involved to get a product or service to the customer. The steps include moving and transforming raw materials into finished products and transporting and distributing the products to the end user. The entities involved in the supply chain include producers, vendors, warehouses, transportation companies, distribution centers, and retailers. Mapping out a supply chain is critical in performing an external analysis in a strategic planning process. The importance of clearly laying out the supply chain helps a company define its market and decide where it wants to be in the future. In developing corporate-level strategies, a company often needs to decide whether to operate a single line of business or enter other related or unrelated industries. Each stage of a supply chain is essentially a different industry, for example, raw material extraction and manufacturing. The supply chain enables a company to understand other parties involved in all stages, thereby providing insights into the attractiveness or competitiveness in industries the company might want to enter in the future. Stages of a supply chain. In its simplest form, stages in supply chain areas are depicted within the Porter's value chain. Porter's value chain is a valuable strategic management tool because it categorizes businesses' activities into 5 parts. Porter's value chain involves 5 primary activities: inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and service. Hence, Porter's value chain can be used as a guide to a supply chain structure which consists of 4 major stages: 1. Logistics stage, 2. Operations stage, 3. Marketing and sales stage, and 4. Services stage. Examples of supply chains. A supply chain can take a product-based supply chain or a service to offer an overall customer service such as shipping of customers' goods, staff, the supply of vessel and fuel to provide the shipping service to the consumer. When a business supply chain is well structured to integrate suppliers and consumers, then the organization will have a good supply chain network that enables an efficient flow of materials and information in a much more complex way. Let us look at two examples of a supply chain: 1. Generic supply chain, and 2. Supply chain for an e-commerce company. Generic supply chain. A generic supply chain is a simple or basic supply chain that a business organization can adopt. A generic supply chain begins with the sourcing and extraction of raw materials. A logistics provider then takes the raw materials to a supplier, who acts as the wholesaler. The materials will be taken to a manufacturer, or probably to various manufacturers that refine and process them into a finished product. The finished products will then go to a distributor that wholesales the finished product, delivering the finished products to a retailer. The retailer sells the product in a store to consumers. Once the consumer buys it, this completes the cycle, but the demand drives raw materials, and the process continues. Supply chain for an e-commerce company. Some organizations require peculiar supply chains depending on the peculiarity of their operations. For example, an e-commerce company requires a different supply chain because an e-commerce firm operates a website to sell its products. When a customer places an order for a product, the product will be processed using the necessary materials, technology, and the workforce. The customer order will be processed through technology such as a checkout cart, an order system, or a third-party product such as Shopify. The payment processors then deal with payment transactions for the order to open a new supply chain. When a product order is placed, the warehouse receives the order and ensures the product is ready for delivery. The warehousing company can be either in-house or a third-party logistics provider. The payment processors use their systems, but, in most cases, third parties' services such as PayPal, Stripe, banks, and other payment gateway providers. After shipping, the package arrives at the customer's door, and the customer receives it. The order then goes from the warehouse to the shipping company. Once again, the shipping may be in-house or a third-party shipping company. Now, let us move on to discuss supply chain management. Supply chain management. Supply chain management is crucial because an optimized supply chain results in lower costs and a faster production cycle. The main goal of supply chain management is to look holistically at the entire supply chain from supplier through to the consumer and review three core areas of people, process, and systems to maximize value from all activities. Supply chain management involves managing supply chain activities to maximize customer value and achieve sustainable competitive advantage. It represents a conscious effort by the supply chain firms to develop and run supply chains in the most effective and efficient ways. Supply chain activities cover everything from product development, sourcing, production, logistics, and the information systems needed to coordinate these activities. The need for supply chain management has never been more popular as more companies are handing over their manufacturing processes to external supply networks that operate on a national or global basis. Working with a third-party logistics provider can provide shorter production cycles, timely strategies, new technologies, and much more. With a growing network of prospects and increased global dependencies, there is a higher risk that the company might lose customers due to inefficiency in one area. These risks can include a shortage of raw materials, production plant failures from natural disasters, strikes, or miscommunications within the supply chain. Logistic partners can help an organization to navigate these risks and properly manage its supply chain to achieve success. Many tools can be engaged to support the building of the supply chain strategy. Value, as perceived by consumers, should be considered when building a system. Value is usually delivered through differentiation of our product or service offering through innovation or cost. Cost or differentiation will form part of the leading corporate strategic objective. Once the organization has developed the strategy, any decisions made within the supply chain must ensure that they deliver against the corporate strategy. This is a supply chain management in operation. The concept of supply chain management relies on two core ideas. The first is that practically every product that reaches an end user represents the cumulative effort of multiple organizations. All these organizations constitute the supply chain. The second idea is that, though supply chains have existed for a long time, most organizations have only paid attention to what was happening within their premises or offices. Few businesses understood, much less managed, the entire chain of activities that ultimately delivered products to the final customer. The result was disjointed and often ineffective supply chains. Organizations that make up the supply chain are linked together through physical flows and information flows. Physical flows involve the transformation, movement, and storage of goods and materials. They are the most visible piece of the supply chain that is as important as the information flow. Information flows allow the various supply chain partners to coordinate their long-term plans and control the day-to-day flow of goods and materials up and down the supply chain. Importance of supply chain management. Supply chain management is a hefty task with hefty rewards. Here are a few ways that well-executed supply chain management can benefit a business or project. 1. Keeps businesses competitive. The simple answer to why supply chain risk management is essential for businesses to be competitive. Markets change, and as the marketplace becomes increasingly global, the need for better efficiency is crucial. As management goals change, too, there is a move away from the past traditional relationships to incorporate and organize all business processes throughout a value chain of multiple companies. 2. Paces with technology. Advances in information technology and the increasing use of outsourcing has also added to the expansion of the supply chain. This has created a need for a more collaborative network among enterprises. 3. Creates productive environments. These changes in how businesses are managed have led to the development of supply chain environments. Multinational companies, joint ventures, strategic alliances, and other partnerships and technological advancements have contributed to more cooperation among those in the supply chain network. As supply chains become more holistic and cooperative, companies must adapt. 4. Proactive strategy. But supply chain management is not merely reactive. It also helps to stimulate innovation and productivity by assisting companies with organizational learning. The more extended a company is in its supply chain, the more adaptive it must be. That leads to creative thinking, which results in innovation and increased productivity. 5. Satisfies customers. Customer service also benefits. Customers demand quality and expect products to be available where and when they want them or delivered on time. Supply chain management will also help with sales support after they have made the purchase. 6. Reduces operating costs. Supply chain management can help a company to reduce operating costs. When well applied, it can decrease purchasing, production and total supply chain costs. This improves a company's financial position by adding to profit leverage, reducing fixed assets, and increasing cash flow. Nomenclatures of supply chain management roles. Nomenclatures of supply chain roles vary from firm to firm. 3 terminologies are commonly used for supply chain roles to describe the head of supply chain operations in business organizations: Chief Procurement Officer, Chief Logistics Officer, and Supply Chain Manager. Chief Procurement Officer, CPO. CPO is an executive role within the supply chain, focused on sourcing, procurement, and supply chain management for a business. A CPO will focus on costs, ensuring they remain under control and continually looking for ways to reduce them. They will also provide the organization's procurement procedures, all in line with internal and external compliance guidelines, including government requirements and company initiatives. Chief Logistics Officer, CLO. An organization's CLO manages the transfer of goods or services that a company offers to facilitate smooth operations. They will ensure the correct products are shipped in precise quantities within the established time frame and provide logistical support to senior management concerning company challenges. Challenges such as truck driver shortages, tariffs like those seen in the US-China trade war, and technology face CLOs every day. Supply Chain Manager, SCM. A supply chain manager works closely with external partners and suppliers to produce the product, create an inventory, and sell products to outside markets. They will evaluate suppliers and negotiate contracts with vendors. Supply chain managers are often considered similar to operations managers, who take a more internally focused approach to operations. Formulating policies, taking control of daily operations and workflows, and overseeing general processes of workers are the primary responsibilities for operations managers. Supply chain risks. Supply chain risk management refers to the process by which businesses take strategic steps to identify, assess, and mitigate risks within their end-to-end supply chain. Internal and external risks can disrupt a firm's supply chain, so it is essential to understand the difference between internal and external supply chain risks. External supply chain risks. As the name implies, these global supply chain risks come from outside of an organization. Unfortunately, that means that they are difficult to predict and typically require more resources to overcome. Some of the significant external supply chain risks include: 1. Demand risks. Demand risks occur when an organization miscalculates product demand and are often the product of a lack of insight into year-over-year purchasing trends or unpredictable demand. 2. Supply risks. Supply risks occur when the raw materials a business relies on are not delivered on time or at all, thereby disrupting the flow of product, material, and parts. 3. Environmental risks. Environmental risk in the supply chain is the direct result of social, economic, political, governmental, or environmental issues that affect the timing of any aspect of the supply chain. 4. Business risks. Business risks occur whenever unexpected changes occur with one of the entities an organization depends on to keep its supply chain running smoothly, such as purchasing or selling a supplier company. In addition, external supply chain risks include losses arising through: 1. Unpredictable or misunderstood customer demand. 2. Interruptions to the flow of products, including raw materials, parts, and finished goods. 3. Social, governmental, and economic factors, including the threat of terrorism. 4. The condition of a supplier's physical facility and regulatory compliance. 5. Natural disasters, including earthquakes, hurricanes, and tornadoes. 6. Unpredictable or misunderstood customer demand. 7. Interruptions to flow of raw materials. 8. Economic, social, and governmental factors, for example, elections, terrorism and exchange rates. 9. Supplier facility conditions and compliance issues, and 10. Stability and management of suppliers' business. Internal supply chain risks. This refers to any supply chain risk factors within a firm's control, which can be identified and monitored using supply chain risk assessment software, robust analytics programs, and the Internet of Things, IoT, capabilities. Although internal supply chain risks are more manageable than external ones, they are unavoidable. Here are some internal supply chain risks. 1. Manufacturing risks. Manufacturing risks are the possibility that a critical component or step of a workflow can be disrupted. 2. Business risks. Business risks result from disruptions to standard personnel, management, reporting, and other essential business processes. 3. Planning and control risks. Planning and control risks are caused by inaccurate forecasting and assessments and poorly planned production and management. 4. Mitigation and contingency risks. Mitigation and contingency risks can occur if a business does not have a contingency plan for supply chain disruptions. Furthermore, internal supply chain risks include losses arising from: 1. Disruptions of internal operations. 2. Changes in key management, personnel, and business processes. 3. Not putting contingencies in place in case something goes wrong. 4. Not implementing proper cybersecurity policies and controls to protect against hackers and data breaches. 5. Not complying with environmental regulations or labor laws. 6. Not having the goods or sufficient products to meet customers' needs. 7. Lack of contingency planning. 8. Disruptions in internal manufacturing operations. 9. Changes in key personnel, structures, or processes, for example, supplier communication channels. 10. Ineffective management, and 11. Cybersecurity breaches. Some technologies can provide visibility into products as they move through the supply chain, enabling a firm to identify potential risk factors. Some solutions use predictive and prescriptive analytics to transform historical data into business insights. Others use application programming interfaces, APIs, to pull data and status updates from third-party vendors and suppliers and external data sources to provide a holistic and real-time view of the supply chain. Sources of supply chain risks. A supply chain faces different types of risk, including risk associated with organizational, operational, strategic, commercial, and external factors. Nevertheless, 4 main sources or channels of risk that disrupt the flow of the supply chain: price, quality, delivery, and reputation risks. Let us discuss these 4 primary sources of supply chain risk. 1. Price risks. Volatility and inflation can disrupt a supply chain with a rapid increase in supplies, making planning difficult unless an organization uses advanced forecasting software. Organizations looking to reduce price risks should purchase and sell hedge contracts, especially in commodity markets. They should also secure contracts with suppliers if they believe prices will rise. 2. Quality risk. Nothing can bring a supply chain to a halt faster than quality. There are 2 types of quality errors in a supply chain: human error and automation error. Organizations need to measure both channels if they want to assess their quality risks. An organization could estimate the probability of human error based on the hours the average employee works, how much work needs to be done, and other factors. For example, an organization that manufactures semi-trailers could analyze that their employees have been working over 60 hours per week, which increases the risk of human error. To decrease the risk, the manufacturer could hire more employees. 3. Delivery risk. Weather, traffic, and inventory strategies can cause goods and products to arrive late, never arrive, or arrive too early. Organizations must measure all factors, even small ones, that may impact the delivery of goods. For example, an organization whose supply chain involves moving products via train must account for the risk that weather brings. Railroad tracks must be cleared before the trains can advance or risk derailment in the winter and snowy areas. Optimizer software can show an organization how to allocate its resources should such events occur. 4. Reputation risk. Social media has many benefits when it comes to the supply chain. One such advantage is the ability to manage an organization's reputation. Reputations take an organization years to build but can be destroyed in weeks if not correctly managed. For example, in 2010, an oil rig owned by BP had exploded and sunk. For 87 days, a seafloor oil gusher flowed until it was capped. This accident had cost them $4.525 billion in fees and fines, but the company suffered a severe loss of their brand. People began to boycott BP, and still do to this day. Some stations saw sales decrease by 10% to 40%. Monitoring social media would not have solved this problem, but it does show the importance of managing an organization's reputation. Most companies ignore their reputation and take it for granted because it is often the most misunderstood risk aspect. Identifying risks is not usually difficult. Organizations often find that they have too many ideas when it comes to potential risks or threats. As a result, what organizations need to master is how to prioritize risks. Supply chain risk management. Supply chain risk management is the process of taking the necessary steps to identify, assess, and mitigate the risks of an organization's supply chain. Implementing a sound supply chain risk management strategy can help a firm operate more efficiently to reduce costs and enhance customer service. Supply chain management refers to how organizations manage the flow of their goods, including all the processes involved in transforming raw materials into finished products. Supply chain management includes the planning and managing of the activities around sourcing, procurement, and conversion and logistics management functions. Good supply chain risk management enhances a firm's operations. The purpose of risk management is to prevent issues and provide loss mitigation if the risk eventually occurs. A significant reason why companies implement global supply chain management strategies is to boost their competitive advantage. Sound supply chains can assist a business to improve the quality of risk, safety, business continuity, and reputation. The benefits of supply chain risk management include 1. Creating a strategic competitive advantage by promoting an agile supply chain. 2. Outperforming competitors are affected by the same shared risks, thus boosting market share when a common risk occurs. 3. Supporting optimal supply chain design by reducing uncertainty and strengthening relationships and trust to reduce risk. 4. Continually detecting, optimizing, and reducing risk exposure and cost compared to competing for supply chains. 5. Operating and continually improving a resilient supply chain. 6. Safeguards the image of a company and improves customers' satisfaction. 7. Enabling organizational self-assessment and certification against international standards to meet safety rules and regulations. Importance of supply chain risk management. Supply chain risk management is an essential subset of enterprise risk management, (ERM). It focuses on implementing strategies to continuously manage daily and infrequent risks along the supply chain to reduce vulnerability and ensure continuity if risks occur. Supply chain risk management attempts to reduce supply chain vulnerability through a coordinated and collaborative approach involving all stakeholders, including subcontractors. The supply chain risk management system identifies and analyzes the critical failure points within the supply chain. Mitigation plans are implemented to ensure supply chain continuity in a scenario that otherwise would have interrupted regular business. The supply chain environment is monitored for risk events and their consequences. Using a risk-based approach prioritizes events based on their frequency and consequences. It promotes the identification of tangible improvements that reduce operational, financial, and reputational risks while meeting the needs of customers and end users. The approach taken needs to recognize that each organization is different and has competing needs and priorities driven by cost, risk, efficiency, and competitiveness. A secondary objective of supply chain risk management is to mitigate financial and reputational risks and increase value within the supply chain through improved performance. Features of successful supply chain risk management. A key attribute of successful SCRM is that suppliers can demonstrate that they apply the principles of good governance. These include providing qualifications, references, competence, quality, reliability, corporate social responsibility and environmental and security compliance. The earlier that suppliers are assessed in the procurement process, the greater the opportunity to address risks and avoid unnecessary failures, delays and costs. With a risk-based approach, the level of assurance required from each supplier is proportionate to the business risk, noting that this is not necessarily the same as the commercial exposure. For example, a low-value contract with a specialist supplier to provide a critical, long lead time component could have an enormous business impact if the component cannot be readily sourced elsewhere. Who depends on what, from whom and from where? An essential first step is to create a detailed map of the entire supply chain to understand better each link, including the supply sources, logistics, and geographies. The output from this exercise is crucial for developing a supply chain risk register that sets out the inherent risk, untreated, versus the residual risk, after mitigation, for each source of risk. The resulting risk register can also help to illustrate the return on investment for proposed improvements. Features of a successful supply chain risk management include: 1. Stimulates many supply chain best practices. Risk management is vital in eliminating waste and stimulating other best practices within the supply chain. Wasting resources can add risk to the organization and supply chain, so materials can be repurposed to avoid waste by planning a sound risk management system. 2. Early detection of risk through fluid communication. Crises can be minimized and managed through effective communication. Since logistic providers can integrate technology and management software, visibility and communication are enhanced to keep everyone aware of the flow of materials and products. 3. Ability to respond to unexpected events. Risk management can help a company avoid business disruption and reduce the complexity of a problem. For example, it begins by identifying what risks might prevent the business from getting its products to customers on time, understanding how badly each risk would hurt its operations, and finding quick solutions to manage the situation. 4. Maintaining business operations. Risks vary from business to business, but by considering the worst-case scenario for each situation, solutions can be established to manage unpleasant events if they occur. Logistic partners can help a business enhance its operations to ensure that everything runs smoothly and is aware of potential risks. Steps of supply chain risk management process. With access to historical and real-time data, retailers can measure and anticipate known risks within their supply chains. Known risks are related to internal operations, which the business can control. Failure to predict and reduce the risk of supply chain failure can affect a firm's product availability and revenue. Identifying potential supply chain risk and taking the necessary steps to reduce risk exposure will help a business serve its customers and fulfill its potential. For example, the risk of a supplier losing funding can be assessed and managed by evaluating historical and current financial stability to project the likelihood of bankruptcy. Supply chain risk management consists of 5 basic steps. 1. Identification of business supply chain risks. 2. Prioritization of supply chain risks. 3. Develop a supply chain risk management plan. 4. Mitigate supply chain risks. And 5. Monitor and review supply chain risk management plan. Let's now discuss the steps of the supply chain risk management process. Step 1. Identification of business supply chain risks. The first step in managing supply chain risk is to identify the risk exposure of an organization. The management of a company should first identify and define the risks present at each level of the supply chain. This outline should include each participant, from the suppliers to the carriers. Then the threats should be documented for future reference. Due to the enormous risks associated with the supply chain, it is beneficial for organizations to use suitable supply chain risk management software to identify their supply chain risk exposures. A supply chain risk management software aims to reduce an organization's vulnerability and ensure supply chain continuity by implementing strategies to manage risks based on continuous risk assessments. Step 2. Prioritization of business supply chain risks. Once an organization has a list of potential risks, it must find a method for prioritizing the risks. Most organizations prioritize their risks based on the probability and severity associated with each risk, but they all differ in measuring severity. Some organizations will emphasize lost revenue, others might place more importance on customer satisfaction or brand management. An organization can calculate the probability by using past data, forecasting data, and utilize insurance companies. Although insurance companies will not provide confidential information, they can share and often publish information about the often made claims. For example, an insurance company can inform an organization about the most common claims made by related businesses. Manufacturers can learn about the probability that one of their employees will be injured. Oil companies can learn about the likelihood that prices will increase. Speculation is helpful in prioritizing companies' risks. The other factor for prioritizing risk is by determining the severity that each risk represents. Predictive analysis is robust for helping an organization identify the potential impacts of an event. The immense challenge with prioritizing risks comes from low probabilities but high impact, such as natural disasters. Some examples include Hurricane Katrina, the Fukushima earthquake, and the tsunami. Once an organization has identified risks and given priority, it can begin brainstorming strategies to mitigate risks. Step 3. Develop a supply chain risk management plan. The next step is to develop a supply chain risk management plan. The business supply chain risks should be ranked based on 3 factors: 1. Impact on the organization, 2. Likelihood of occurrence, and 3. The company's preparedness. Based on these factors, the management can score each risk based on the 3 factors and set a tolerance threshold representing the business's vulnerability and ability to handle each hazard. The supply chain risk management plan should be detailed and consider all relevant information. A business supply chain risk management plan will not be the same as another company's plans because each operates uniquely. Each company has different suppliers, customers, and stakeholders. Moreover, business shareholders have different expectations. However, the Institute for Supply Management highlighted 5 essential components of supply chain risk management plan. 1. Find alternate suppliers. 2. Talks with critical suppliers. 3. Qualifying more suppliers. 4. Buying extra supplies. And 5. Talks with major suppliers. Step 4. Mitigate supply chain risks. After developing the business supply chain plan, the next step is to mitigate the company's supply chain risks. Minimizing a firm's exposure to supply chain risk will help the organization be more resilient and responsive. It will also give the company comparative advantage over its competitors. Internal threats or risks are generally easier to mitigate, as they lie more within the company's control. Nevertheless, the company can still proactively manage its supply chain effectively. This will assist in minimizing the occurrence and impact of any disruption. Here are 5 ways an organization's supply chain risks can be mitigated. 1. Undertake a business impact analysis. A business impact analysis should be undertaken to enhance a business's resilience to withstand any potential supply chain disruptions. To conduct a business impact analysis, it is essential to understand potential business disruptions and their impacts. To understand a firm's exposure to supply chain risk, it is necessary to systematically review the business, processes, people, suppliers, customers, and market environment. Hence, the company needs to conduct a thorough business impact analysis of its supply chain risk. It is also essential to identify critical business processes and resources required to ensure efficient operations. Then assess how these key elements will be affected by supply chain disruptions. This will assist the management in understanding potential exposure to risk and addressing the impact on the business. By identifying which business activities will be most affected by supply chain disruptions, the company can quantify and prioritize its supply chain risks. Hence, the company can develop a culture of proactive agility, rather than reactivity, in responding promptly to manage the impact of business disruptions. 2. Assess and monitor new and existing suppliers. An assessment of new and existing suppliers is necessary. Effective monitoring of suppliers is fundamental to ensure a good supply chain and foreseeing risks mitigation. When partnering with new suppliers, be sure to assess them against the following factors. 1. Capabilities measured against the company's needs. 2. Opinions and experience of their other customers. 3. Resources, including staff, equipment, storage, and materials. 4. Commitment to international quality standards, for example, International Standard Organization, ISO 9001. 5. Management and control over policies, processes, procedures, and supply chain. 6. Financial health, do they have a healthy cash flow? 7. Cybersecurity processes and policies, particularly concerning GDPR if applicable. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, is a legal framework that sets guidelines for the collection and processing of personal information from individuals who live in the European Union, EU, and 8. Approach to communication and collaboration. Being thorough with the assessment of new suppliers will help a business reduce its supply chain risk. It will also place the organization in the best position to work with raw material suppliers to improve the firm's products and services. To further mitigate supply chain risk, relevant security elements should be part of suppliers' agreements. Proactive elements such as an incident response plan and data security policy can help preclude and minimize the impact of supply chain disruption. The company should also keep a close eye on its existing vital suppliers and regularly review their attitude toward managing supply chain risk. Monitoring of suppliers would also assist a business to understand its suppliers' risk exposures or factors, including their financial status, regulatory compliance, risk management strategies, and the political stability and technological security of their countries. 3. Reduce the concentration of supply. If the business deals with multiple products or has secured a significant bulk discount, then it needs to weigh the benefits with the risks. The company should reduce its dependence on a single supply line to mitigate the risk of supply chain disruption. Relying too much on a constant and uninterrupted supply from a single vendor, country, or region can create a single point of failure. The company should identify and build relationships with alternative primary and secondary suppliers. Understand which suppliers would represent the best alternative sources should a problem with the preferred suppliers occur. The company should choose suppliers from different geographic regions. Seek out those who supply through secondary port locations. Although the cost may be the primary driver for supply allocation, the company should maintain a diverse supplier base. 4. Work with suppliers. The company should collaborate and communicate with its suppliers. It should develop a collaboration platform and communications framework to ensure an effective exchange of information. This will mitigate supply chain risk, help reduce costs and errors, and facilitate collaboration on logistics and security. Make sure all suppliers are aware of the company targets and customer demand cycles. When a fluctuation occurs, they will be prepared and able to deal with it more easily. Be proactive instead of reactive. Agility should be integrated into the company's cash flow management. With working capital available to smooth out demand, the company is unlikely to experience disruptions in supply due to increased demand. This ensures that fund is available to pay suppliers promptly. A supply chain with a healthy flow of working capital is unlikely to have internal funding problems. The company should make a flexible working capital finance facility part of the business long-term cash flow strategy. This will ensure smooth seasonal demand fluctuations, optimize its stock inventory, and prompt payment to suppliers. Using appropriate working capital finance will improve cash flow throughout the company's supply chain and ensure robust business operations. 5. Proactively address supply chain cyber threats. With big data and information sharing growth, supply chains are increasingly becoming a flow of information like goods and services. Information and security are often shared throughout a supply chain. This means that the cybersecurity risk of businesses involved in the supply chain is high, especially for weak companies. Cyber attackers may identify the organization with weak cybersecurity within the supply chain and explore the vulnerabilities in the vulnerable systems to gain access to other companies involved in the supply chain. For example, a software supplier could be breached via malware that modifies source code which can be distributed to enterprises that use the software. For a business supply chain to be secure, all parties involved in the supply chain should ensure adequate and well-coordinated security measures. Firstly, the business must strengthen its cybersecurity procedures and policies. This involves educating and checking the business workforce, improving processes, and upgrading technology if necessary. Secondly, the business should place cybersecurity as a vital aspect of its supply chain management. Review contracts and ensure that all the organization's suppliers have well-integrated policies and robust internal IT security procedures. The implication is that a business should establish a multi-party supply chain risk management framework to integrate all companies involved in its supply chain. Maintaining common standards and improving supplier relationships with stakeholders will facilitate easy anticipation, identification, communication, and mitigation of cybersecurity risks. Thirdly, the organization should make a concerted effort to understand potential challenges arising from suppliers and develop a contingent supplier disaster recovery plan. A business and its suppliers need to have a response plan before a breach occurs regarding cybersecurity. Step 5. Monitor and review of supply chain risk management plan. Designated employees should monitor the business supply chain risk management plan. This is necessary to ensure the effectiveness of the company's supply chain risk management. Successful tracking allows staff to respond promptly and reconcile any issues caused by the threat to ensure the supply chain can continue to operate. The company should develop a governance procedure to enable managers to assess risks and determine better ways to treat the risks. In addition, a board of experts can help managers adapt their risk management plans by using metrics to improve response time and reduce damage. By continuously updating strategies, businesses can efficiently counteract evolving threats. Supply chain risk management strategies. Identifying and prioritizing risks is worthless if the company do not develop strategies to mitigate the risks. Organizations can engage several types of supply chain risk management strategies. Here are 10 supply chain risk management strategies. 1. PPRR risk management model. Global supply chains, especially retailers, typically use the PPRR strategy. PPRR stands for Prevention, Preparedness, Response, and Recovery. Prevention is to ensure the implementation of precautionary measures to mitigate supply chain risks. Preparedness ensures the creation and regulation of a contingency supply chain risks management plan. Response ensures contingency response to counteract risks and minimize the impact of supply chain risks. Recovery aimed at analyzing processes to ensure speedy recovery of operations and boost revenue. 2. Manage environmental risks. Now more than ever, businesses need to understand how to manage environmental risks. Retailers worldwide have been preparing and recovering their supply chain operations from the effects of a pandemic, for example, the COVID-19. Businesses struggled to fulfill contracts, keep operations running, and launch shipments on time with a disrupted supply chain. This emergency has caused many organizations to switch from single sourcing to multi-sourcing and mitigate the risks of losing a supplier. Other organizations have decided to rework their business models to adapt to new customer demands. For example, American breweries started producing hand sanitizer as a response to the significant stockouts. While it is not possible to eliminate environmental risks, businesses can develop response plans to prepare for different scenarios. With software and analytics, companies can better understand their supply chain's strengths and weaknesses. This allows management to create an effective contingency plan for each process in the chain. 3. Mitigate cyber supply chain risks. Software and other digital technologies that use the internet to streamline supply chain processes can be helpful. However, they also introduce cyber threats, such as viruses, hackers, phishing, and malware. These risks can expose sensitive information on clients, vendors, and funds. Businesses should, therefore, implement robust cybersecurity defenses including development of standardized compliance rules for all external parties, including manufacturers, vendors, and distributors. Implementation of security measures to authorize only certain users, restricting access to classified information. Performance of a risk assessment on suppliers before finalizing contracts. Assign ownership to each dataset to clearly define what party can access the information. Train all employees on cybersecurity protocols. Implement software that monitors every supply chain process and alerts users of unusual activity and metrics. Partner with suppliers to create a disaster recovery plan. Implement backup hard drives to store separate copies of data in case of a malfunction or security breach. Regularly update the software's firewall, antivirus, and anti-spyware processes to ensure digital fronts are safe. 4. Analyze suppliers' financial stability. Before an organization commits to a supplier relationship, it should first use a credit rating agency to generate predictive stability reports based on the potential vendor's financial reputation. The analysis will use the supplier's financial history to estimate the risks they introduce to the company. This ensures that businesses are building secure partnerships while reducing supply chain vulnerability. 5. Monitor freight carrier metrics. Retailers must ensure that their product shipments arrive on time to meet deadlines and keep the remaining supply chain processes scheduled. Just one late delivery can delay hundreds of order shipments. By partnering with freight carriers that offer real-time metrics and tracking, companies can continuously monitor deliveries. Management should assess new and existing carriers by using key metrics, including transit time. This metric is the number of hours or days a shipment takes to reach the customer. Number of stops and stop time. Carriers must stop to rest and eat, and every stop in a delivery route elongates the transit time. Adding just one additional stop can result in late delivery and unsatisfied customers. Therefore, knowing the intermediate stops and stop times allow companies to calculate when a shipment will arrive. Loading time. The average loading time is when it takes to load a carrier and fill out documentation once it arrives at the dock. Route optimization. Companies should understand how their carriers optimize their route to conserve fuel and reduce travel time. These metrics determine expenses and arrival time, directly affecting supply chain efficiency. Maintenance routine. Freight carriers should maintain a routine maintenance schedule to prevent breakdowns and delay deliveries. 6. Implement a comprehensive logistic plan. Retailers need to develop a logistics contingency plan to ensure that operations can continue seamlessly if there is an unexpected disruption in the supply chain. Management should consider several elements during the planning phase, including outline supply chain processes to identify which operations are the most vulnerable. Assess suppliers and third parties to determine political, geographic, and economic risks. Expand the supply network to introduce alternatives. Audit providers through assessing their disaster plans. Develop a response team to make final decisions in the event of a crisis. Establish dependable communication lines between employees and partners to ensure every party understands their responsibilities. Document all operations and establish a universal platform that all employees can access for reference. Adapt contingency plans according to updates and current events. Create backups plans. 7. Train employees to anticipate risks. Management should not be the only group of staff that can identify and prepare for risks. Companies should hold training sessions for employees that teach them how to define and anticipate hazards in the workplace. Risk awareness curriculum should include 1. Common internal and external supply chain risks, 2. The best risk management practices, 3. Software best practices to improve cybersecurity, and 4. How to assess the supply chain. 8. Continuously monitor risks. Once the supply chain management strategy has been implemented, management must continue to monitor operations to ensure their long-term effectiveness. Often, companies forget this remaining step, leaving errors and discrepancies unnoticed. By carefully tracking each step of the supply chain, businesses can detect and immediately respond to potential risks. With advanced software, these processes are automated, generating updated reports and insights. 9. Model data to define risk scenarios. By equipping the supply chain with predictive analytics and data modeling, businesses can forecast potential risks. With big data, the software pulls internal and external information on each process to model different scenarios and suggest ways to respond. This allows management to develop contingency plans to anticipate the worst-case scenario. 10. Manage impacts associated with supply chain risks. Risk prevention is a robust risk management strategy, but no amount of preparation can prevent a risk from occurring. Some events, for example, natural disasters, cannot be prevented. However, an organization is expected to plan for such events and develop a crisis prevention strategy to manage the events if they occur. For example, in 2011, Fukushima was devastated by an earthquake and a subsequent tsunami. The tsunami caused the meltdown of a nuclear plant which took about 20,000 lives. The nuclear plant said that this, the worst crisis since Chernobyl, could have been prevented. For instance, they could have built multiple power supply locations to prevent an event like this or developed a plan to evacuate people once the reactors were melting. Regardless of whether the nuclear plant could have planned for it, this event demonstrates the need for scenario planning, which is the method that executives use to determine implementation strategies for future events. At the forefront of scenario planning, the company is Shell Oil Company because it addresses all sorts of scenarios and develops actions if their future predictions occur. For example, Shell plans what to do if an oil spill occurs in a particular geographic region. They had a plan for what to do when the oil prices began bottoming out over a year ago. They have developed a plan for all probable scenarios. Many organizations leave themselves exposed to risk by not planning for it, i.e., not leveraging software that offers scenario analysis and improved planning. Organizations can manage risks by developing disaster preparation plans, hedge purchasing, supplier segmentation or other various methods. Conclusion. In this video, we have discussed supply chain risk and the management of supply chain risks. This video emphasized that risk is inherent in supply chains, but many organizations are not giving supply chain risk enough attention. The cost-effective way to manage the impact of supplier risk to an organization is to implement a strategic risk-based approach. The proactive assessment of risks associated with the supply chain aims to reduce vulnerability and ensure continuity. Mapping the supply chain, assessing suppliers, and maintaining a risk register are crucial steps in thriving supply chain risk management. Supply chain risk management provides a massive competitive advantage to the company that implements a risk management strategy in its supply chain, especially one that can account for happenings across the entire enterprise. Organizations can develop a risk management strategy by identifying risks, prioritizing them and mitigating the risks. This is not a one-time action. The most successful organization makes this a regular and ongoing approach. They will search for risks every so often and create a plan to address risks as their business changes. Integrated planning software that allows users to leverage what-if and scenario analysis is the best way for organizations to discover, prioritize and offer solutions to mitigate risks. I hope the video is educative and beneficial to you. Which aspect of supply chain risk and supply chain risk management discussed in this video do you consider to be most important? Please post your response and comments below in the comments section. If this video has been educative and beneficial to you, then, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Thank you for seeing the Risk Management of Everything videos. We love to hear from you. Please post your comments and questions in the comment section down below. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Risk Management of Everything channel, and press the notification button so you can be notified when we upload new videos. Thank you.